Okay, so we are in chapter 3, Mishnah 3. Anybody know the page number in the book?
89.
89, page 89. Abi Hanania ben Chadyon. How's the volume, by the way?
Very good.
Good, because I have my fancy microphone. I took it home, so I'm hoping people can hear me well. Okay, so Rabbi Hanania ben Chadyon. Rabbi Hanania ben Chadyon was one of the 10 martyrs. There's a lot written about him. He was Rabbi Meir's father-in-law, Bruria's father, and he himself. We read about him in our class many years ago on stories of the sages. We talked about him. He was murdered in a horrific way, placed in fire and with the Torah scroll wrapped around him, and that's how the Romans persecuted him and killed him. He's the author of this Mishnah, so let's keep that in mind perhaps as we read it. Here's the Mishnah. If two sit together and there are no words of Torah between them, this is a session of scorners. Okay, so you're sitting with somebody and there's no words of Torah between you and somebody else. This is scorners. As it says, nor sat he in the seat of the scornful, rather the teaching of the Lord is his delight. Okay. But if two sit together and there are words of Torah between them, then the Shekhinah abides among them. The Shekhinah is God's presence. Then they that feared the Lord spoke one with another, and the Lord hearkened and heard, and a book of remembrance was written before him. For them that feared the Lord and that thought upon his name. Now I have no scriptural proof for the presence of the Shekhinah except among two. How do we know that even one person who sits and studies Torah, the Holy One, blessed be he, fixes his reward or her reward? As it is said, though he sit alone and meditate in stillness, yet he takes a reward unto himself. Okay. It's interesting. The next Mishnah also is similar to this. It speaks about three people who sit to eat together. Let's just read that. Next Mishnah on page, we'll go back, okay? Next Mishnah on page 91 says this. Rabbi Shimon, that's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, very famous Tana. If three have eaten at one table and have not spoken words of Torah, okay, you ate at a table, you didn't speak Torah, it's as if they've eaten sacrifices offered to the dead. As it is said, for all tables are full of filthy vomit when the all present is absent. Oh, it's not good. But if three have eaten at one table and have spoken words of Torah, it is as if they have eaten at the table of the all present, blessed be he. As it is said, he said unto me, this is the table before the Lord. All right, so what would be what's the theme of these two Mishnahs? No, so I think that's one way to read, and I saw this in Ethics from Sinai. He speaks about how like some of that language can turn into like really filthy things when you're not elevating it with some type of content, spiritual content. So that's the language of vomit and
So
that type of thing.
It's not vomit. It's like word vomit. It's like unnecessary
Yeah, I like that.
things coming out of your mouth.
Yeah. So that's the simple reading, is that we should try to have some Torah content when we're together, sitting. So the first Mishnah is speaking about just people sitting next to each other. The next Mishnah is saying they're sitting down to eat. I'm very careful with that at my Shabbos table to have some Torah, introduce Torah at different intervals. It's a great value in coming together and spending time together. There's great value in that, and to put insert a little bit of energy, some spirituality, some Torah, it really makes it much better. That was kind of like on page 89. That's kind of what I talked about here with the vitamin G. If you read it, basically, somebody in the Bet Tefillah office one day, one of the people who were working here, they were telling me about all the vitamins that they take, and I had heard about this vitamin, how people frame this as a vitamin G a while ago. So they're like, I take vitamin A, I take vitamin B, C. I go, do you take vitamin G? Like, what's vitamin G? Like, that's the God vitamin, meaning like the idea there was that it's okay to take other vitamins. It's okay to spend time. It's okay to enjoy experiences with others. And you also need the vitamin G. That gives you life, that gives you energy, that gives you strength, that gives you inspiration. That was kind of like what I talked about in my in this piece here, 3:3. But I wanted to offer a little bit of a different direction, and I want to base it on the language in the Mishnah. And I think I spoke about that here a little bit. Yeah, in the very beginning, that I like to. I'm into peer review. Peer review. So the language of the Mishnah and many different. There's like, I would say four elements of the language of the Mishnah that points to this. The need to engage and hear another side. So it's speaking about, it says here, two sit together. Okay, these two could be sitting together and learning Torah. Doesn't say that they're not. Let's consider that they are. They're sitting together learning Torah, but there's no words of Torah between them. Right? Ein beinehem divrei Torah. They could have had divrei Torah on their own. They could have been learning, but there's not beinehem. There's between them. There's no exchange of ideas. When there's no exchange of ideas, the Midrash Shmuel points out, first of all, there's not as much life and energy, but also mistakes can creep in, and also like it's a limited perspective. We need to bring in other sides into the discussion, and that's why another piece hints to this here, where it says the verse that's brought here. It says, let me make it a little bit bigger. The verse that's brought here is Az nidbaru. Where is it? Here. Az nidbaru yirei Hashem ish el re'ehu. Some say nidbaru means that you're getting the other to share. Lidaber is to speak. Nidbaru means you are getting the other to share. You're encouraging them to share so you can hear their perspective. Another piece here which hints to this idea of needing to hear another perspective. I think this idea of being written down, ikatev sefer zikaron, it's written down in a book. If anybody ever wrote a book or like an important paper, many eyes oftentimes go through those papers and those documents before they're published. So that could also be hinting this idea that you've in order for something to really be published in God's book, you really need to go through it and hear the different sides and have some peer review and bring a different perspective. Sometimes the other perspective will sharpen your perspective. Sometimes it'll correct your perspective. And so we need that in order to really publish this book by God. We need that other side. And one more piece here. It says when someone's sitting alone, echad, and it says ve'osek b'Torah. If you remember last week, we mentioned we make the blessing la'asok b'divrei Torah, to be engaged and involved in divrei Torah, even if you don't understand it. We still get a mitzvah. So when it speaks about the one person who's learning, it says la'asok ve'osek. Because there's a greater chance that one person who's by themselves might just be osek and might not get to level of understanding, but they'll be osek. And so they're engaged, but they're not promised that they're going to understand. And that's what I think the Mishnah might be saying. Like, there's reward for somebody who learns by themselves. However, learning with another person, it enables you to get to the depths of things, and it removes you from what they call moshav leitzim, which is like scorners. That's basically the idea, how I understand the Mishnah. The main piece is beinehim. We need to have a discussion beinehim and not talk past each other. And really be open to listening to the other side. It's very difficult to listen to somebody who really thinks differently than you. But many times if we open ourselves up, we might change our opinion, or we may be able to expand our approach and kind of incorporate other aspects to it. So that's kind of like how I understand that Mishnah. So let's go to the next Mishnah. It talks about food. Okay. And Jews love to talk about food. So we're going to do that. This Mishnah says, if three have eaten at one table and not spoken words of Torah. Okay. So I have what I think is a nice interpretation on this. But before we get there, the Mishnah seems to be saying simply that we have to sanctify our meals. Sanctify our meals. It's not enough it says here, 3 have eaten at one table, 3 come together. When there's a harsh critique here, because when 3 people come together, it's like it's just many times planned. You get together with 2 people or by yourself, it might be kind of random, but when you sit down with 3 people, it's an intentional meaning. And when that's the case, you definitely should up your game and bring Hashem into the mix. Now, there are many ways to elevate your meal. Can anybody think of one way that's written in the Mishnah is to learn Torah? What are other ways to elevate your meal from a Jewish perspective? Yeah, Janet. We can't hear you though, or I can't hear you.
Sandy was mentioning that when you bench, you're elevating yourself, you're doing a mitzvah, and the 3 people together make a mezumin.
Mm-hmm. Any other ways we can elevate our meals?
Thank you, Sandy.
Yes.
Welcome. I think by what we serve, by doing the best of what we can offer, depending on our financial situation and the time
Oh, that's
we have,
awesome.
by creating as many good vegan dishes as we can possibly come up with.
That's the right answer. That's great.
And also to invite somebody who may be in need and maybe can't afford a good meal. So if you
Yeah.
invite somebody to your table who needs it, that's elevating.
Yeah. So the Mishnah speaks about like offering sacrifices to the dead. And then the opposite is bringing God's presence. We want to enliven our meals. So definitely bringing people who are in need to our meals. Any other ways that we can elevate our meals? It's important to elevate the meals because otherwise we are just doing what all other creatures do. We eat because we need to live and survive. But if we want to be spiritual beings, we get to take those basic needs and try to elevate them. So
Well, I think like on Shabbat, I'm sorry to be a
Yeah.
second opinion, but on Shabbat in particular, less doable during the week because of people's schedules. But on Shabbat, it's how we set the table, how we make it much more. We use the best of what we have to set the table. So it elevates the beauty of the.
I love that. Last week's parsha, we learned the Song of the Sea, and it says there, "Zek keli v'amveo." This is my God, and I will beautify my God. So there's a lot of ways to beautify. Many people, we all have those things that we put a lot of money into. We all have them. It could be designer clothing. It could be furniture. It could be, I don't know. We all have those things that like we're willing to invest money in. Maybe you renovated a certain part of your house in a way. We all have the things. We should consider using that same passion, that same energy to service of God. We want to beautify God and bring God into our lives in a beautiful way. So you could do that. A Shabbos table. You have a beautiful Shabbos table. You have beautiful silverware, plates. The setting's nice. The color scheme, the food, the placement of the food. Anybody getting hungry? But all these things are ways to like really bring Hashem into your space. And the language of space that I mentioned now, the Mishnah speaks about space. I want to talk about that from two different sides. Take a look here. It says the first Mishnah 3:3. The main thing I was putting emphasis on Beinehem Divrei Torah, in between them. This Mishnah, the emphasis I want to put on Makom. Here it says Rabbi Shimon Omer. So 3 they ate at a table and they didn't say Divrei Torah. It's like they ate from sacrifice to the dead. It says Ki kol shulchanot malu ki tsoah b'li makom. All the tables were filled with all this bad stuff, vomit and whatnot, and there was no place for anything else. That's a simple reading. We could also read this as b'li makom, that God wasn't there. B'li, without makom. God is called makom. There's that space. And so what we're talking about here is making space for Hashem at the table. Making space for God's blessing, making space for beautifying God at the table. And the way you do that, at least according to this Mishnah, is you share Divrei Torah. And it says here, again, makom. Shlosha shachlu, 3 they ate, and they said Divrei Torah, kilu achlu mishulchano shel what? Shel makom. So it's really making space for Hashem at the table, and through doing that, the meal becomes kind of like it catapults us to another level. We can use our meals, our physical engagement, our material pleasures, and use them to draw closer to God. It's a really beautiful idea, and that we can do it through eating through meals. So we mentioned a few examples. I have a few more that I wrote down. We also have singing at the meal. That's a big one on Shabbos, at least. Shabbos and sing during the week too. Maybe not. Many people do that. Singing is a way to elevate the meal. Another one is I wrote in the book. I spoke about mindful eating. That can be a way to connect to God. People don't talk about that much. There are many different modes of Jewish meditation. One of them is mindfulness, and it's the idea of being present in what we're doing. And through being present, we can connect to the makom, which is Hashem. So there is an ability to do that. And that's by really paying attention to what we're doing. I have a drink here, taking a sip, tasting it, enjoying the sensations, like really living in the moment. The more that you can do that while you're eating, it's a very hard thing to do. I wrote about in the book, like if you put certain snacks in front of me, like those snacks will be done very quickly, right? I remember everyone has that thing that, they see, and then when they see it, they can't get out of their mind. They really want to eat it. So we all have those things, but like really, or many of us eat while we're watching TV or we're watching our phone or while we're doing something else, right? But how often do we actually pay attention to what we're eating? To actually taste the food, to put food in your mouth and experience the sensation of what's going on when the food is in your mouth, to see what your taste buds, to see how your taste buds react. It's a very rare thing that we do this. I don't do it that often, but I try to do it from time to time, and I learned about it from somebody who just taught me how to do mindful eating. Now, the idea behind mindful eating, though, from a Jewish perspective, is that through doing this, you can connect on a deeper level in some ways to God by really being grateful for what you're enjoying and really kind of feeling that God's blessing you in the moment. So that's how I would add on. Like, people don't talk that much about mindfulness in Jewish circles, at least circles that I'm in. And I think that mindfulness and God, Hashem, can combine and become a service that we do as Jews.
Making brachot before you eat is also
100%.
just as, yeah. And then I would even suggest that's part of mindful eating, because you're not just saying, okay, I'm eating. You're like thanking Hashem for that particular thing in that particular category. And I think that really does help you think twice before you continue to eat. It gives you
That's the point of the brachot. After a while, sometimes they become a little by rote, but the idea is that we're supposed to, when you make a bracha on food or on a drink, you're really supposed to pause for a moment. I think I told you this story before, but when I first became more observant, I was really careful to make the brachot, because I actually didn't know them by heart. So I would read something or take extra time because I didn't know it. Now I know it by heart. Unfortunately, I kind of do it kind of quickly, but I try my best. But at the time it was so I was when was it? I was in a restaurant with my mother, and I went to the bathroom, and then I came out and I started making the blessing that you make after you go to the bathroom. And she's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I was like, "No, I'm just making a bracha, but it's a really long bracha." Just going on for a while. And she's like, "What are you doing? What's wrong?" And it's like, I just made a blessing after going to the bathroom. She's like, "What are you guys doing over there?" And I had another actually funny thing where
I agree, it's a little long for.
it's a long one, yeah, but there's so much to thank God for when it comes to going to the restroom.
Yeah.
It's an important blessing. But I had another case where I stayed in a hotel with my mother when I first became observant, and there was a bathroom that connected our two rooms. And at the time, I was washing my hands. When you go into a bathroom, there's a suggestion to wash your hands, even when you don't go, when you walk through it. Even some say when you walk through it. So every time I walked into her room, I was washing my hands. She's like, "What's wrong with you? Why do you keep washing your hands?" I was like, "Well, it's because I went through the bathroom." Anyway, but stories from the old days. Anyway, but there's another idea I wanted to share with you here about makom, and I think this is the main message I want to highlight here, is that in addition to this idea of bringing God and spirituality into your meal, and really seeing the meal as a as a springboard for divine connection, which is like an awesome idea that our meals can bring us closer to God. It's an awesome idea. But the idea I want to highlight to you is this idea of making space for others. This idea of making makom. So if you, it says, if we read this together, it says, Ki kol shulchanot malu ki tzorah bli makom. There's no divrei Torah. When you're sharing divrei Torah at the table, you're really engaging the other. You're listening, they're listening to you, you're making a connection. And many times at our tables, we forget to do that. And we'll just eat and then go. And this is telling you, take a moment and engage with each other. They're using the example of divrei Torah, but you can expand this beyond that. Many commentators expand, so I'm going to do so as well. And the idea is that you can eat at a table and there's no makom. What's bli makom? It's not talking about without, it could be talking about physical, there's no space at the table. It could be talking about no Hashem, which is called makom. Or it could be speaking about that I didn't make makom for other people. I didn't engage them properly. And then it says here, but three ate together, and they said divrei Torah. They did engage with each other. They made space for each other. It's like they ate from makom baruch hu, like Hashem comes and Hashem helps fill that place. Hashem is there. Hashem. And it's a very important, very valuable thing when we're sitting with people at the table to put our phones down, put them down, put them in our pockets or wherever. Look at the person. Really try to engage each other at the table. You can do that through divrei Torah, obviously. That's what the Mishnah seems to be talking about. But I think it goes way beyond that. That's how we can also find Hashem. You can find Hashem through the interpersonal connection. Hashem appears through making space for other people. And so that's, I think, what the Mishnah could be speaking about that as well. That's the makom. So there's three ways to understand makom. The simple reading is that there's no place at that table for food because all this bad stuff. And we could understand that. And somebody, I think Laurie Traub said that if we're not speaking divrei Torah, it can devolve to bad talk. And that actually really is true. Sometimes you're at a table and it's just like people are just talking about who knows what. Sometimes it's good to bring it back and elevate the discussion. Then we also had this idea of Hashem, making space for Hashem at the table. And Hashem is called the makom, the place. So we do that in many different ways. I stress the mindful eating in the book. And lastly, we have this idea of making space for others. I think that that's also a beautiful thing. This idea of engaging others in discussion while we're in the middle of our lusts, our drives, our eating food and stuff, to still be able to put it aside and be present. The presence is a very, very important thing. All right, let's go to the next one. This is a really cool Mishnah. This is Mishnah 3:5. We might get through 4 Mishnahs today. All right, let me put this on the next page. All right. Rabbi Hanania ben Achinai said, what did he say? One who wakes up at night or walks on the way alone and turns their heart to idle matters, behold, this person is mortally guilty. Change. This includes everybody. So what is going on here? Anybody want to help me out? Here are the pieces. One who wakes up at night, walks on the way alone. Now we're back to our whole discussion of threes. So we're going to try to connect them, try to see how these are interrelated. One who wakes up at night, it says ne'or balayla. It could be that you're up. It could be that you're not just waking up. It could be that you are up. You're staying up all night. It could be. One who walks on the way by themselves. This could be at night that you're walking by yourselves. It could just be that you're walking alone anytime. And then somebody who turns their heart to idle matters. What is the problem? What's the conclusion from that? That they're mitchayev ben asho. They're worthy of losing their their life. This person mortally guilty. Okay, so who wants to take a stab at this? Who wants to not take a stab? Mortally guilty, but who wants to try to explain what's wrong with these three things? That could be what the Mishnah is simply saying. There are things that are dangerous to do. Not sleeping enough can be dangerous. Everybody has their definition of what that is. Okay, but we need to get the amount of sleep that we need. If you don't, then you're damaging yourself. The second one, if you're walking on the way by yourself, that's also dangerous. In those times, they didn't have a phone. They didn't have 911. You're going on the way by yourself. They didn't have always paved streets, with lights. If you're going on the way by yourself, that you're causing danger to yourself. The third one is that if you're just getting involved with nonsense, or what was the language? Levatala, how they translate that. Idle matters all the time. You'll go crazy after a while because all you're doing is staying involved with idle matters. So that's what the Meiri says. The Meiri says all three of these are dangerous things, and we have to be careful to protect ourselves from them. So he says here, you have to sleep 8 hours. He says walking alone on the road involves danger, as roads are often plagued by robbers when one travels alone. It is easy for them to ambush him. Likewise, turning one's heart to idleness, meaning engaging in no activity whatsoever, leads to mental sluggishness and dullness of thought. Okay, so basically, the Mishnah seems to be saying, take care of yourself. They connect to the last ones. I'll read it. This is how Rabbeinu Yonah reads this. This is how I explain it in the book. Let's say we do something like this. One who wakes up at night and walks on the way by themselves, that's fine. That's perfectly good. Somebody is up in the middle of the night and they're walking alone by themselves. These are times, Rabbeinu Yonah says, when you're by yourself. Alone time. What should you be doing with your alone time? You should staying up at night, walking alone is good, is okay. But what are you doing with that? Are you turning your heart to idle matters? Or are you watching Netflix for 3 hours or TikTok or whatever? Or are you choosing it to listen to a Torah lecture or do something spiritual? That's what it's saying. It's not saying that this and this are bad. The first explanation, the Meiri says it is. Here it's saying there's times when you're away from people. Anybody who helped raise kids know that there's not many windows where you have that time in those years. But when you do, and you get that free time, you might be at night when everybody's asleep. Or it may be that you're going for a walk on your own. What are you doing with that time when you get to yourself? Obviously, you need to take a break sometimes and relax or whatever. But beyond that, and that's what it's saying, you should use that time wisely. Use your alone time for good things. And I think that could be what the Mishnah is speaking about. You could read it that way. So I wrote about that in the book. Here it says like this. There are times when we have stretches of time. There's stretches of time. And it's perfectly okay. We have shows that we like. We have things that we want to watch. You know what I'm saying? It's saying try to insert good. I don't know, like I have sometimes, like if I don't have any energy, I'll just turn on like different rabbis telling stories about other rabbis and stuff. Like I don't know, just some inspiration, or like I've telling like Siporei Tzadikim, which is like stories about Rav Ovadia Yosef or other rabbis for inspiration, or it's like we have a choice when we get in the car. What are we putting on? What podcasts are we putting on?
Exactly.
So that's alone time too. We're driving on our own. So we have our podcasts that we like, but there's no harm in putting on like a Parsha podcast or a Torah podcast. Like those thoughts go into our heads, and it's hard to do it sometimes because you have to. It's not natural always because we naturally want to just listen to the things that we we're thinking about politics or audiobook or whatever. But we have to, it's good to push ourselves from time to time and like allow the other content in as well. I think that's what it's talking about. So it's not always easy, and it's not making the decision not to listen to a Torah podcast or something like that doesn't mean that's a bad decision. But if we're only listening to other podcasts and not to Torah stuff, and that's not great either. So we have to find what works and try to fill our minds with that stuff. I want to share one more idea on this, another direction to go with this. And this is like the main thing I kind of want to highlight here in addition to that piece. So this is a new interpretation I thought of just now today. So it says here, second. The language here says, "V'me'alech b'derech yechidi." Sorry, someone was up at night and they're going on their own path by themselves. You could read this like this: somebody who is awake when things are dark, they're able to see things, at least according to their own opinion, in a brighter way when everybody is in darkness. And they're going on their own path. They have an opinion that runs a counter to where everybody is. They've seen the light. They're up in the night. They see the light. And they have their own individual view. And it's different than everybody. They're walking on their own yechidi path. That's perfectly good and that's great when you're doing it for the right reason. But if somebody does that and they think that they see the light and they have this individual opinion, but their purpose is mifaneh, but it's pointing, mifaneh, their heart is pointing to what? To vatala. That's like annihilation. Nihilism. Meaning you have the individuals who have an opinion, they have what to say, they think they know that they've seen the light, but the whole thing that they're trying to do is deconstruct. That's a problem. This person is mortally guilty. And these type of individuals are in every circle that we find ourselves. We have to be very careful. If you see the light and you're going on your own path, you're making a statement and you're going to push back against what's going on, try to do it in a way that's constructive and not just to deconstruct. There's a tendency to deconstruct, to become nihilistic in the sense that pointing out everything that's wrong, and that's fine from time to time. But if that's all we end up doing, that's mitchev ben asho. You've like lost our connection to your nefesh. You've lost the connection to truth, to realness, and we have to be really careful about it. Like when we see the light and we have like a really strong opinion, to be careful that we're not just doing it because we're annoyed by something or we're in a bad mood or we're jealous or I don't know, any other motives that could lead us to just want to tear something down. It's so easy to tear things down, to take a stand for that, but it's harder sometimes to take a stand when it's something positive that we want to go against the tide for that. So it might be warning against that. So that's another way. It's kind of creative way to read it. It's not the simple reading, but I was trying to think like, why is pointing your heart to vatala, to like these idol matters, why is that so bad? So that could be a way to think about that. All right, the next Mishnah is Rabbi Nechunya ben. Let's take a look at that. Sorry. Using our time wisely, by the way, that was Rabbeinu Yonah's approach. This is how grand and desirable are these times for thinking about Torah, since he has no work to do. He does not hear the voices of other people. Right? So, okay. Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana Omer. Anybody who accepts upon themselves the yoke of the Torah has removed from themselves the yoke of government and the yoke of worldly concerns. And whoever breaks off from themselves the yoke of the Torah, the yoke of government and the yoke of worldly concerns is placed upon them. Okay. What is going on here? One way, the simple way that some explain it is they say, if you look on page 95 in the book, it says, many read this Mishnah in the following manner. When one completely devotes themselves to Torah learning, Hashem will in turn remove from them the burden of government and the need to work and earn a living. In other words, Hashem will provide for all their needs. As was the case with Eliyahu and Avi and the tribes of Issachar and Levi, who were involved in Torah and spiritual matters and supported by others. So somebody who totally devotes themselves to Torah, this is a way to understand it. Universe will help them and support them in doing so. That could be, or their father-in-law. No, just joking, but there's like a joke like that, right? Married, they're newlyweds, and he meets the father-in-law, and the father-in-law is like trying to assessing who is this yeshiva bacher? Like what's his story? And so he goes, what do you how you, I know you're learning Torah all day, but how are you going to where are you going to live? He goes, Hashem will provide. Okay, good. You'll have it. So how are you going to get around? He goes, Hashem will provide. And he goes, so how are you going to have money to pay for food, for the family? You're just learning Torah all day. Hashem will provide. Hashem will provide. And so later on, some people asked the father-in-law, what did you think about your new chatan? He's like, he's a extremely nice guy. He's full of faith. He's full of faith. But there's one thing I just don't understand. Why does he keep calling me Hashem? So that would be a pushback against this approach. So let's try to understand. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There are people who learn Torah, and because I believe in this, they built themselves up so spiritually that they have divine blessing and they're supported. So here's Rabbi Beryl Wine says this, and many others say this as well. He goes, all of us carry yokes, one way or another. But unbeknownst to many, we do have a choice as to which burdens to bear. Carrying the yoke of Torah lightens the load of the other yokes. So he's not saying that you're not going to be carrying other yokes. But when you have Torah, you have God, you have faith, it lightens the burdens. Ma'avirin, they remove from you the yokes. Not like you're free of them, but rather it gets easier. It's easier for you because you have a coping mechanism. You have a reservoir of spirituality. You have faith. You have perspective. You have divine. You have good character traits. All those things you develop through Torah. It makes the yokes of government, makes the yokes of parnasa, of livelihood, much easier. Those are the government, the turbulence of national life, and the burdens of daily life and making a living. Torah places events in perspective and organizes our priorities so that the so-called important matters gradually recede in significance. People who live a life of spirit and nobility, and not merely one of the flesh and accumulation of wealth, have a different outlook on life, and therefore measure their success by loftier standards. So I think that's a pretty awesome one. Like, you can have parnasa, you can have wealth, you can have a job, but if you have Torah, ideally, and you're God-fearing, you're not going to be obsessed with it. It's not going to take you over. And if things go bad on a national level, things go bad with the government, things go bad in your livelihood, the yoke won't be as difficult of that than it would be if you didn't have the Torah. So it's a different explanation. It's not like removing the yoke completely, but it's making it easier. And in the book, I brought a source from Rav Kook, where he says, it's a nice quote. He says, if you look on page 96, he says, page 96, the middle paragraph, it says, when the Spirit shines, even foggy skies make pleasant light. What does that mean? This could be connected in a way. You could, if you ever had a time when you've closed a good deal, or you graduated from something, or you completed some sort of project that took you a long time, or you heard a really great class, or it's an amazing concert or something like that. In those moments, everything seems bright. You could go outside, it's the foggiest day, but the skies look bright, right? And so the idea is from here is that the more that we have Torah's perspective, the more we are connected to Torah, the brighter things will be. The happier, hopefully, you'll be. The more elevated you'll feel. I know people come to our shul, and I feel like that they genuinely feel happy. There's so many smiles in our shul. There's so many exchanges, connections, and we have to really kind of limit them sometimes in the main shul because people are so excited to see each other. There's sometimes too much talking, but the idea is that like when we're around things of Jewish experiences, it picks up our soul. It elevates us. If we have that, life is much easier. It makes life easier. And that could be what it's saying. The yoke of all these things. People are, oh, what's going to happen with the government? Every day, the news gives you a different message. And it doesn't matter, like, it doesn't matter which side politically you're on. The news is trying to always, whatever news you listen to is trying to get you nervous about something or get you, and that's how they make money because they draw people in that way. And some of the stuff's real, some of it's not. And we don't have to be blind to what's going on. But how much space is it taking in our head? How much is the government, all the stuff of the government? How much are we worrying? How much control do I have over it anyway? I don't have that much control over it. I can go vote, you know. So it's okay to think about, worry about it, but how much is it controlling us? The more we have Torah, the more that we have faith. Faith is huge. Faith is so huge. It really helps us with during COVID. I don't know if you remember. During COVID on CNN, they had a death ticker. Remember that? They literally had a number of the amount of deaths at every second, every month. That created so much anxiety in people's minds, and that during COVID, CNN or all those channels, they made a good amount of money from people tuning in and the advertisements, etc. Their goal is to make us anxious because if we're anxious, we'll watch them, and that's okay. We do get anxious. All this stuff's real, but Torah helps us put it in perspective. We don't get drawn in too much. We can't if we're thinking about it all the time, worrying about it all the time. That's not the Torah way. It's okay to worry. It's okay to be realistic, but if it takes us over, we are crumbling under the yoke of the government, under the yoke of our livelihood. Obviously, we have to worry about our livelihood. We have to worry about having what we need. But if that also takes us over, we crumble under that yoke. We need other things to prop us up. And thank God we have the Torah. We have Hashem. We have all of the inspiring things of Judaism. That's hopefully gives us a little bit of reprieve, a little bit of energy. People on Shabbos at our shul, I just see happy faces. I think when you have a break from that, you get it put things in perspective, and you can feel elevated, and that's okay. We're allowed to feel good. We're allowed to feel happy, and those things are still going to be there. The government, livelihood, all that stuff's going to be there, and we have to take care of it. But we don't have to carry it with us. I think Akasu was saying the idea of carrying it. How much are we carrying that with us? It's really important to make sure we're not carrying. If we see ourselves in like those thoughts, ruminations, repeating thoughts and fears around this stuff, we have to figure out how to remove that yoke and bring in another yoke. And it could just be going to synagogue, could be going around spiritual people, could be listening to a class, something. But it's all what we're carrying, and that we have. Thank God, we're blessed to have ways out of that. Have a good night, everyone.